The feeling of participation and accomplishment are two of the most thrilling aspects of off-roading. However, being relegated to the passenger seat prevents young riders from experiencing either of these in adult-sized machines. Polaris led the way in providing young enthusiasts with a chance to get behind the steering wheel with their RZR 170, later RZR 200. But recently, some serious competition has entered the market. Kayo released their RZR 200 competitor, the S200, in May of 2023. Like the Polaris, it features an air-cooled 200cc class engine with a fully automatic CVT transmission and fully independent suspension at both ends. Where the S200 differs most significantly is in the sheer scale of the machine, with a much larger footprint and longer suspension travel. Can the Chinese-built Kayo S200 provide serious competition for the Taiwanese-built RZR? Continue watching and find out. UTV On Demand's first test of the Kayo S200 was made possible by make staying in contact simple with the wireless PackTalk Edge ORV communication system from Cardo. Dynamic mesh communication provides up to a 1-mile range between units and up to 5 miles in larger groups. Water, dust, and mud-proof, it offers easy in-helmet installation with sound by JBL. Offering hands-free voice-activated operation with up to 13 hours of talk time on a single charge. PackTalk is ideal for both in-car and car-to-car communication, allowing you to connect up to 15 units at one time. Ideal for side-by-sides, ATVs, dirt bikes, or any other type of off-road use.
You guys ready?
We're ready.
Roll it.
Learn more or order yours now at cardosystems.com. Interior and styling. Driving for us was experienced side-by-side driver 14-year-old Finley Meyer, dressed in an MSR helmet, jersey, and gloves. Our first impressions of the S200 are positive, with a modern, appealing styling that lies somewhere between a Segway and the Maverick X3, highlighted by LED tail and headlights with daytime running lights up front. You enter the machine through quarter doors, opening with push-button operated latches mounted on the interior. So far, they open and close without issue. Both seats are surprisingly well appointed, featuring automotive-style slider adjustment with a lever located under the front. Both seats can also be leaned forward via a lever on the side. Cut-and-sewn seat covers are typically a bragging point on high-end trim-level adult-sized machines that come standard on the S200. The seats feature pass-throughs for the factory-equipped 4-point harnesses, additional features typically reserved for higher-end adult-sized machines. The steering wheel is tilt-adjustable, but it does require loosening a bolt to adjust it. The gas and brake pedals are well-shaped and easy to modulate. At around 5 feet tall, Finley was able to get comfortable in the driver's seat with it slid all the way back, leaving plenty of room to scale down the seating position for smaller drivers. It is possible for a 6-foot-tall person to fit in the driver's seat, just in case adults want to join in on the fun. The harnesses needed adjustment several times throughout our test day. We'd consider replacing them for serious off-roading. Next to the steering wheel, you'll find a keyed ignition and pull-out choke. A well-lit digital instrument display with indicator lights is mounted center dash. Below it is an on-off switch, button for the horn, and switches for the lights and high and low beam selection. On the right side of the cockpit, there's a simple, well-designed grab handle for the passenger. On the floor between the occupants, there's a parking brake lever and gear selector that feels solid and well-built, along with dual cup holders that could be a touch deeper for riding in rough terrain. That's it for in-cab storage. One thing that's missing is a rear wall in the cabin, separating the occupants from the engine bay. It's an item that Kayo should add, that the aftermarket can offer for existing units. The S200's rear cargo bed consists of a tubular steel bottom with a nylon cover that velcros in place, featuring a flip-up access point for the fuel cap. You might be able to tie items down to the bed, but on this youth sport machine, carrying cargo didn't seem to be given much consideration. Along with a standard whip flag for added safety, overall styling and interior design exceeded our expectations. Engine performance. Powering the S200 is a 196cc air-cooled 4-stroke engine with a 2-valve, single overhead cam head design. A substantial size oil cooler helps keep things running cool, in addition to a fan on the back side of the cylinder. There's also an air duct that helps channel air across the cylinder for additional cooling. Air and fuel are fed to the engine via a 29mm carburetor. Fuel is drawn from a 3.9-gallon fuel tank, offering 1.4 gallons more than the RZR 200. The top end is mated to a fully automatic continuously variable transmission, featuring forward, neutral, and reverse gears. The S200 features two-wheel drive like its competitors. It's shaft-driven with a sizable-looking rear differential. Ventilation for the engine and CVT appear designed for serious off-roading. Air intake for the engine is mounted around shoulder height, behind and between the occupants. The airbox is located behind the driver's seat and provides simple toolless access to the foam filter for easy maintenance. Intake and exhaust for the transmission is mounted even higher, directly behind the seats outside of the cockpit. Testing in the warm summer months, pull out the choke and turn the key, and the engine fires up quickly. From neutral, the transmission consistently shifted fully into gear, something we can't say for all adult-sized machines. While cold, the engine sputtered a bit under acceleration. This cleared up a bit when the engine warmed up. We removed the airbox lid, and that seemed to smooth out the engine quite a bit. The carburetor on our machine would require a little jetting to get it running perfect. Dirt Wheels magazine tested an S200 with an intake and jetting from Fuel Customs, which they tell us carbureted flawlessly. For parents, there's an adjustment on the gas pedal that limits speed. After a couple of runs, we adjusted it all the way out, adding noticeable speed and performance. Unrestricted, our car was seeing top speeds between 35 and 40 miles per hour on relatively flat ground. Acceleration is decent, but easily controllable. You can get the rear end to slide a bit, pitching the S200 into corners, as long as the conditions are loose or slick. The engine is fast enough for fun on flatter ground and mild climbs, but the CVT seemed unwilling to backshift enough to maintain adequate RPMs on steeper climbs. Finley tackled a few decent inclines that the engine couldn't quite pull a 200-pound adult up, so the results should be similar with two younger occupants. We feel it could be turned into a more capable climber with a little CVT tuning. Unfortunately, the back of the center console partially blocks CVT access, requiring you to remove the seats and floor pan. Or you can do what we do. Simply trim the interior's plastic to provide easy access for removing the CVT cover. Noise from the drivetrain was minimal in all conditions. Overall, the engine package is decent, but it seems to leave some performance on the table for those willing to do some jetting and CVT tuning. Suspension and handling. Our first impression, and that of our aftermarket partners who've seen the S200 up close, is that the chassis and suspension appear rather impressive and overbuilt for the engine size, and in comparison to the competition. A substantial looking steel frame mates up to a 6-point cage. The front of the car is protected by a steel bumper featuring mounts for easy winch installation. Unfortunately, there's no skid plate on the bottom of the frame, something we feel should come standard on all side-by-sides. Accompanying its rack and pinion steering is dual A-arm suspension found at both ends, controlled by 5-way preload adjustable shocks. Suspension travel is substantial, with 10 inches of travel up front and 10.5 inches of travel out back, compared to the 7 inches found at both ends on the RZR 200. Tire sizes are 22/710 front and 22/1010 rear, mounted on steel wheels. The tires look like a scaled-down version of the popular and versatile Maxxis Carnivores, but we wish the machine came with a square tire and wheel setup, like premium adult-sized machines. The S200's claimed dimensions are sizable for a youth side-by-side. It's 10.5 inches wider than the RZR 200 at 58.5 inches. It has a 9.8 inch longer wheelbase at 74.8 inches. Overall height is 2.6 inches lower at 56.9 inches. The S200 does give up a half inch of ground clearance at 9.5 inches. Its seat height of 16.1 inches is nearly 8.5 inches lower. Added up, the S200 has a claim dry weight of 705.5 pounds, 34.5 pounds lighter than the RZR 200. Suspension action is pretty outstanding. It provided a plush, planted feeling over everything we threw at it. Overall, the ride is quite plush. The shocks react well to smaller bumps, with a very respectable amount of bottoming resistance on bigger hits. In spite of its widely offset wheels, steering is light and accurate, with little bump feedback felt through the steering. Combine the composed suspension with the car's sprawling dimensions, and the S200 is amazingly stable. It corners flat at speed and feels planted on off cambers. Finley was flying down her family's steep, twisty gravel driveway, with speeds that we estimate approaching 50 miles per hour. The chassis and suspension are way more than a match for the stock horsepower. We think it could easily accommodate an engine double this size, which makes the S200 easy to drive and difficult to get out of control. Overall, suspension and handling are pretty awesome. Braking. Four-wheel hydraulic disc brakes slow the S200. The rear calipers protrude a little more than we'd like, but facing rearward, they shouldn't be too susceptible to damage. Steel-braided brake lines are standard. Braking power and feel are both excellent. They provide a solid feel at the pedal, and stopping power is more than capable of dealing with steep descents or scrubbing off serious speed. Performance is on par with the chassis and suspension, way more than adequate for the stock engine. Aftermarket support. Aftermarket support is coming online for the Kayo S200. Our machine arrived outfitted with a Super ATV front and rear windshield, and a metal roof replacing the standard soft top. To increase power, Fuel Customs has developed an intake and filter system. DASA Racing is also developing an aftermarket exhaust. Kayo support racer Luke Strickland is already having success racing the S200. He uses a GY6 scooter clutch kit that also fits the RZR 200 to help him get the most out of the engine's available power. Sponsored by the Speed Shop, Luke is currently testing aftermarket pistons, camshafts, and stiffer valve springs that may come to market. It's also rumored that premium aftermarket shocks are currently being developed. Conclusion. After spending a couple of days with the machine, our final impression of the S200 is nearly as positive as our initial one. The chassis, suspension, and handling are nothing less than impressive. The engine and CVT might take a little fine-tuning to get the most out of, but a clutch kit, jets, and even engine bolt-ons are far less expensive than upgrading the chassis and suspension. Most of the details appear well thought out, with only a few issues that really warrant updating from the factory that the aftermarket could easily address. The RZR 200 certainly has some serious competition on its hands, with the Kayo costing $1,200 less. The S200 would be a serious threat to the Polaris in a shootout, and we'd certainly take the Kayo seriously for building a youth side-by-side racer or just having fun on the trail. If you'd like to get your young side-by-side enthusiast out of the passenger seat and behind the wheel, the Kayo S200 is certainly worth a serious look. Learn more about the Kayo S200 and their full line of side-by-sides, ATVs, and dirt bikes at ridekayo.com.